topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Hello and welcome to the new episode of Mindfulness in Action. And today I am talking with Peter Bonanno. I met him as a teacher of a diet program. We will be talking a little bit more about that, but let me tell you a little bit about Peter. There is a couple of minutes is not enough to introduce all the work that he has done. But shortly, he's a meditation teacher, a 7-time co-founder of mindfulness-based organizations, and some organizations he worked with. You probably heard Search Inside Yourself, and then he worked with United Nations, with Google, with Stanford, Kingdom of Bhutan. I mean, there's so much to touch on the work that Peter has done. But today we are really going to be looking into these startups and what does it mean to actually start a contemplative organization, a startup. It's a challenging task even just to start a startup, let alone to make it contemplative. So I'm going to welcome Peter to join me on the screen.
Hi, Dalida. Great being here.
Hi, Peter. Yes, it's just as we were waiting to start with the show and having that minute of silence, and we were having a giggle how it actually reminded us of a diet. But this time we are not going to have a structured practice, but actually more of a conversation. And I'm really inspired to explore your journey and the way how it can support perhaps someone who is thinking about something like bringing contemplation into their organization. I'm personally really interested in how leadership can begin to bring some of the principles of contemplative practices, and I'm sure I don't mean only mindfulness. There's so much there when we say contemplative practices. So could you share a little bit about your journey into contemplative practices, and then maybe what was the first of the 7 startups? How did it all begin?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I find it's always interesting to tell a story about where something started, because sometimes I find myself asking, well, gosh, how far back do I start? And I think in truth for me, it would start when I was a child. When I look back, I didn't see it this way at the time, but I used to spend a lot of time in nature. I grew up in this lovely rural area in the northeastern US, and I would just spend time in nature. I would go for walks. I loved being around trees, and I felt a real sense of peace and oneness with nature. And I think that's really, as a young child, what nourished me. From there, I was raised in a Catholic family, and I found I was always really drawn to the wisdom stories that I learned from that tradition, the gospel stories about someone having a moment of doing something unexpected, but that was a very wise and humane thing to do. And I thought, oh, gosh, when I grow up, I want to be a priest, maybe something like that. And I didn't end up going on that path. I ended up, as I got older and got into college, exploring psychology and meditation and so on. I was just curious for what else was out there. And some time goes by. I got into meditation practice for a long time. I did especially the slow moving practices of Tai Chi and Qigong, those sort of embodied, slow, mindful movement practices. and then unexpectedly fell into doing some of this work professionally, which I never expected I would do. I was not even aware that was a possible career path, but lo and behold, here we are now.
Yes, and from some exchanges that we had in the past as well, I know that intuition is something that you really apply in your life. You really follow those moments. So was that something that also led you to connect professionally, all of that, such personal practice and bringing into professional context?
Yeah, I would say so. So I have become a believer, or more and more over time recognize the way I tend to feel drawn to certain things. And if I feel that energy or spark for something, there's a level of trust I have in that, even if I don't always immediately know at the time why that is. And sometimes it happens serendipitously. So I was originally, what I thought I was going to do, and what my degree was in international educational policy, and I thought I would go work in that area. I was leaving graduate school and had a series of interviews with an organization I wanted to work for. I'd been through 3, 4, 5 rounds of interviews. All along the way, they're saying, "Great, we'd love to have you come work with us. Yeah, we just have one more round." And then all of a sudden, the last round interview, I stopped hearing from them. It was completely bizarre. This very professional organization. And all of a sudden, there's just nothing from them from a couple of weeks. And then when I heard back, it was a very unusual message. "Oh, no, actually, sorry, we got to stop the process." And at the time, I was really devastated and thought, "Oh, this is what I thought my career was going to be." But as it turns out, the fact that that door closed meant that another door opened, and I began working on a first project of bringing mindfulness and social emotional learning to education, which I never would have done if I had taken that job in education policy. So yeah, I believe in following spark, and I believe sometimes that the universe kind of hands you a gift by closing a door or opening a door and giving you a path to follow.
Yeah, it requires a lot of trust in the process, at least from my personal experience, to have such an attitude, and maybe not to rush when one door closes. Sometimes taking time to wait for the and is it waiting? How does one transition from one door being closed and until another one opens?
Yeah, I'm in the struggle of that as much as anyone else who is doing it. So what I've found works for me is this is one of the benefits of a mindfulness or a meditation practice I've found, is giving me some space to stabilize myself, maybe not getting into too much catastrophic thinking. Of course, there will be some of, "Why did this happen? Why me? This is the end. I'm never going to find an opportunity." But I noticed by having something like a meditation practice or a reflection practice, it stabilizes me. And that fear, that catastrophic thinking, it's like a really difficult wave that rides through me then. And then somehow it's hard to explain. It just passes through you. And then at the end, there's some more space. And then I find my mind going, "Well, okay, well, what else might be possible?"
And it seems that there were some possibilities that I would assume a lot of people would see as some amazing opportunities to work with organizations and on a large scale, right? Like not only having 7 startups, but also really working with people who are out there in the world, having some credibility and wide outreach, so that this has a ripple effect, right? Of goodness,
Yeah.
I would assume, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's another area that there's a famous description by the Apple co-founder Steve Jobs, who talks about often our life paths only become more clear when we look back on them and we can connect the dots and say, "Oh, I see. That's really what my purpose was." Is it wasn't clear at the time, but when I look back, I can see it. And for me, I've noticed that I've been drawn to ways to bring mindfulness or contemplative practices to the more mainstream society, to people who are living the everyday life of families and workplaces and leadership and business or government or education, people working in very day-to-day mainstream ways, finding ways to bring mindfulness practices to them. And I've like, when we were talking about what could the title of this discussion be, and I the words came to mind for me of structure and soul. And for me, that's what I see, and what I've tried to do is help create structures where we can think about how to practice more self-awareness and more empathy and more compassion in the workplace, how we can all learn and cultivate those skills. But that, of course, within those structures, whether that's a training workshop or whatever it may be, preserving the real thing that's hard to name, heart, presence, soul, whatever we might think of that as, that really deep thing that touches us when we find a deep connection with ourselves and deep connection with others.
And what is it? There's an image in my mind that is kind of like hijacking my attention. And the image is remembering when I was in China and I went to Google and they asked me to give them, for their engineers to give an introduction to mindfulness. And they kept asking me, why do we need to do that? I mean, it was... it's like I was very much like such an open heart and thinking like, yay, everybody will recognize all of this, right? And then there was this bunch of engineers thinking like, why do we need to walk slowly? Of course, I was just at the beginning of my capacity to also introduce these concepts. I know that this can be really challenging, and it requires very, very strong skills as a facilitator, as someone who also knows the practice and knows the organization. And something you mentioned in our talk about this conversation is the creative tension between the absolute and the relative. Can you share a little bit more? How do you connect these two, right?
Yeah. One of the things I love about bringing contemplative practices into a workplace, for example, is that it forces me each time to get very real and grounded and in a very human way to think about what the value of these practices are. So, and that's the tension, a creative tension, right? How do you take something like, for anyone who's tried even a couple minutes of mindfulness, it's difficult to describe, right? Often there's something about it that can feel really fulfilling and settling and peaceful, but it can be hard to put a name to what's that benefit that we're feeling. Presence, right? Presence, what is that? And so each time I go teach a workshop, I mean, really I've taught hundreds of them, and every time I find myself asking again and again, like, oh yeah, what is this? What is this benefit? And for the people that I'm with right now, what's the benefit? And so that's the reflection. That's the creative tension is, what is the value of mindfulness to an engineer, to a salesperson, to a parent?
Yeah. And what is coming up? Like, where does your heart... Hold on, let me withdraw that. It's a little bit... I know that I worked with teams and with people where I feel like, wow, this is such an amazing fit. It actually, there's readiness, there's openness, and it's really amazing. And they want to take it further, but also it's with groups. So when you talk about, sales team or, like engineers or parents or educators, SEL and mindfulness, right? Like, where do you think is readiness at the moment?
Well, I think the things that people are always most interested in are the simplest things, is what I come back to, right? As human beings, we all want to live a life that feels meaningful, and everyone has things in their life that are meaningful to them, their work, their communities, their families, their faith. And we all have struggles, right? The world is moving quickly. It is stressful, confusing at times. We have conflict in our relationships. And at the end of the day, what I find myself talking about the most, no matter who it's with, is these very basic human things of how do we navigate our lives? How do we build our own capacity and wherewithal to navigate change, and not just navigate it, but navigate it while holding on to a sense of something that feels meaningful and purposeful and fulfilling to us. How do we have fulfilling relationships with other people, navigate tensions, learn to be authentically ourselves, even as that might create tensions with those around us, but knowing that as we learn to empathize with others and be more authentically ourselves, actually we get better marriages, we get better family relationships, we get better outcomes in the workplace. So it's really those very simple things that I find myself coming back to, no matter who it's with.
Mm. So yeah, what I'm hearing is not necessarily a specific group of people. It is for anyone who is open for this, but the application is really in every single facet of life and the role that we are having. What do you see has changed from the initial project, or maybe whenever that was? And I somehow tend to see it pre-COVID, post-COVID kind of like era, right? What is your experience telling you now? What's shifted? Where is it? Where is the need right now?
Yeah. I want to offer a phrase which has come to mind for me a few times over the past couple years, actually starting since around COVID. And that phrase is, the revolution is common humanity.
Oh.
It's something it just came to me one day around 2020, and it stayed with me ever since then. And actually that's a good lead in to talk at some point about the contemplative diet practice that we met through doing and that I've been working on. I mean, I'll tell a short story. When I started years ago, this was in the early days of a project called the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute. This was a nonprofit that spun out of Google. There was an engineer at Google, Chade-Meng Tan, who had started offering mindfulness and emotional intelligence taught in a very scientifically oriented way, which worked for engineers, drawing on a lot of the neuroscience research that had been developed in the 2000s, 2010s. And I remember in that small nonprofit, as we were starting up and thinking about how to bring this program outside of Google to organizations around the world who were starting to become interested in it, we were having this debate about a slide in the program. And the debate was, could we put the word compassion on a slide? Could we have that up there, or would that scare people off? Would it scare off a business leader or a leader of HR if they came into the room and thought, oh my gosh, compassion, what is this? What is this doing in the workplace? And now I don't feel that way at all. There's been such a big change where some terms, which I remember when I got started, were completely foreign, not in the mainstream conversation at all. Mindfulness, self-compassion, compassion didn't exist. We really felt like any time we were going somewhere, we were introducing these terms. Now they're out there. You can find people talking about compassion or self-compassion in lots of places. And so in that way, I do feel like things have evolved and things have moved. And whereas maybe in the early days of the mindfulness movement, we were just trying to talk about the basics, about the power of attention and settling the mind and becoming aware of your emotions. And now I feel like there's more and more readiness and more need to talk about compassion and common humanity and how we can operate from that kind of a space in our everyday lives.
So I share the same feeling, and at the same time, the more we talk, the more I'm also realizing it's almost like the more we know and the more we present, as if the mental health issues are expanding more and more. So I'm just wondering, like, if this is not is this not preventative, or is this just the time we are living in where mental health crisis is given? How do we go about? We know so much about, and methodology, probably there's different ways to go about it, and yet it seems that mental health is at such a great point, basically.
Yeah, well, there's, at least the way I've seen my role in this and the colleagues who I work with, is there are a lot of very big social changes that are taking place. The ways we work, the way communities are shaped has changed a lot. A lot of us are living our lives more and more online and on screens, mediated by devices than ever before. That's just a huge change that's happening. It's happening with children. And as a parent of 2 young children, it's something that's really on my radar and something I'm concerned about. And communities have changed. I mean, I grew up in a small community, and we had 2 churches in the town, and most people went to one of the 2 of them. There was a lot more community gathering. And if you look at just the statistics and research on these things, people have fewer and fewer friends, they belong to fewer community groups. And so I think these are bigger social changes that are happening, and really over the course of a couple of decades in human history, that's nothing. Right? We're all trying to adapt to massive, massive changes that have happened over just 20, 30, 40 years. And so the practices that we do, like mindfulness, or like this contemplative dyad, where you can spend some time each day just having a real dedicated connection with another person in a way that's a response to this, and trying to be more deliberate about bringing human connection into our lives. And it's also not everything. I mean, I still think bigger picture about socially, and bigger factors that influence how workplaces take place and how families spend their time. So I think it's worth looking at all the above, both what we can do as individuals to reclaim our mental health and reclaim our connection with other people. And I think it's also worth looking at bigger socially and politically, what are the forces that influence how we spend our time and how we connect with other people and how we don't.
Yeah, there's another factor, of course, as you were sharing all of that, and the whole expansion of AI and artificial intelligence and everything. And I remembered every time when I would go into maybe recording some sessions, and then AI would transcribe it so quickly, and it would often spell diet practice, right? And DIET, right? So can you share a little bit, like, what is really the diet practice? I know that you're having a strong conviction, which I really cherish, that the connection, one, of course, it's the whole compassion side of it, but the human connection is really the big call that we are receiving at the moment, when as we continue to bring the practice to the wider audience. So what is the dyad?
So the dyad practice, DYAD. So dyad just means 2 or a pair, because the idea is what you do is you get together with another person virtually for 15 minutes. And I should say, this is a practice I learned from a researcher named Dr. Tanja Singer at the Max Planck Social Neuroscience Lab in Germany. She had honed this practice over time, drawing on a practice that would happen at meditation retreats, where you not only do meditation, but where you might sit with another person and hold a question for a repeated period of time. In that case, they did a question of, who am I? And that's a very deep question to sit with another person repeatedly, again and again. Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? But so she took this and adapted it into something which was actually very doable, powerful partner practice that you could do for 15 minutes in your everyday life, where, like Dalida and I, we met doing these. And so it's funny to be now talking with you here, where I can almost imagine we're back in that space, where we would get together just virtually like this, and we would take a minute of silence together, And then you might start by asking me, there's two different prompts that we do during this particular form of partner dyad practice. Yeah, Peter, please share an experience of a difficult emotion in the last day and how it felt in your body. And then I would have 2.5 minutes to self-reflect on that and to share it. And why this is like a meditation or like a mindfulness practice is because I'm doing some self-reflection, right? And this is about me doing the reflection. I'm not trying to communicate anything to you. I'm not trying to impress you or seem smart to you, although sometimes that tendency might try to come up. But I'm just self-reflecting, and your job as the listener is just to give the gift of your full attention. Because this amazing thing happens, which I'm truly fascinated by, that what we share when someone is truly listening is different than what we share when someone is partially listening. Right? If we know that someone's attention is partially elsewhere, either because they're distracted or by their phone, or they're thinking other things, they're thinking about what they're going to say when it's their turn to talk, we ourselves don't go as deep into self-reflection. But when someone else is like really present with us, they're just giving their full attention. This is what I've experienced. I can reflect on something that happened in my day and get some real insight of like, wow, I didn't realize I was feeling that. Wow, I was feeling really sad, or I was feeling scared, but in the moment, I didn't catch it. I didn't notice it. So anyways, the dyad practice, I would just have 2.5 minutes. Okay, here's my challenging situation. You'd then ask me, okay, now share a moment of gratitude, because it's nice to have that balance of a difficult emotion and then a moment of gratitude. And again, I would have the chance to just verbalize out loud, and you would listen, and then we'd switch. And then so I would ask you afterwards, okay, now Dalida, please share an experience of a difficult emotion, how it felt in your body. You have 2.5 minutes for that. I'm just listening now. And then gratitude, and then I'm just listening. And then we close with a minute of silence. So that's the essence of a practice. And that's the structure part of it, is that it's like super structured. There's no small talk. There's no chit chat. There's no advice. It's just one person shares while the other person listens. You switch roles, and then you say thank you and goodbye. And what I have found is I love this practice in 15 minutes, which is something I can squeeze into my day in the middle of meetings. I can get some real insight and even feel more resolved about some emotion that's kicking around in my system that I haven't been as clear on before.
And so there's the regularity and connection, and so it's also working with a different partner every week, right?
That's right. Yeah. So we would do this every day together, and every day for 15 minutes, we schedule it when we can. And then the next week you change to another person who's doing the dyad practice. And that's a really interesting dimension too, because you get exposed to a lot of different people who you would never connect with otherwise. I mean, currently the community I do this with are people from all over the world, and we all know the structure of the practice. We all follow the same rules and the do's and don'ts, so that there's a lot of trust and a lot of psychological safety. And with that, I find I can meet someone, and if we have that shared agreement about what we're doing, someone I've never met before, someone who's in a totally different part of the world, I can feel this real deep sense of connection and shared humanity with them through the practice also. So there's a part of it which is about self-reflection, and there's a part of it which is connecting with another person and really experiencing a shared humanity as someone else shares about their challenges with their kids or their job, or they share their gratitude about the beautiful tree that's outside their house.
It's such a powerful practice. I also remember going through this inertia of wanting to share more, or wanting to be in a certain way so that maybe I would be accepted, right? Like I have to respond, and the structure was revealing so much about me and the patterns, my social patterns. I remember that one part was such a strong session within that week of revealing the patterns as social behaviors. So I really, really got a lot out of the practice. And I know you are now at the point of kicking off or starting the new venture, which is really about bringing the practice back into the space, because at a certain point we were all hoping that it would really take off, and then there was lack of funding and we had to stop, and that was such a sad moment. So you're reviving it, right, with a team of teachers that were there. So so it's Friday, 3rd of April. Maybe somebody's going to be listening this sometime later, but on 23rd of April, you're planning an introduction session of that particular practice, right? Could you share a little bit more?
Right, yeah. So a group of us who were previously just doing this as a self-organized group, we just got together. We'd say, okay, well, the two of us will be partners this week, two of you will be partners this week. We had a moment a few months ago of saying, I'm so grateful for this practice. Each of us had this moment of feeling this real gratitude for these moments of simple human connection during our days. And we thought we'd really love to be able to open this up to others. So we started an organization called Daily Connect. And the idea is that we're going to build a practice community of people who want to have these moments of simple human connection during their days. And we think of it like a ritual or a practice. I call it for myself, it's an oasis. In the midst of a busy day with kids and a job, I have these 15 minutes where all I'm doing during that time is being in deep listening with another person, and then me getting to share about some significant moments from my day, and another person is just listening. I love that. I know no one is going to give me advice. No one's going to say like, oh, poor you, or anything like that. Like, they're just going to listen, which is a lot of times really what I want. So that's the practice. And we're going to start doing some information sessions for anyone who wants to come check it out. You can go to dailyconnect.co to find out more about that, or look me up on LinkedIn. But yeah, our vision for this is, I think of it as of the people, by the people, for the people practice, where it's just a community of people. This organization at the heart of it, it's just a community of people who enjoy having these moments of daily human connection. It'll be a subscription-based community for people who want to join, and there's an app so that when you and your partner schedule, you just join right away, and through the app, it'll immediately guide you through the process. Okay, who's the speaker first? Who's the listener first? What are the prompts? It keeps the time for you. Just keep it that way. It's super simple. You can, again, be in the middle of your workday and just say, okay, I've got my diet now for 15 minutes. I just jump in, do that practice, and then I can go back to my everyday life. And I'll just say, this is my favorite thing about this. I think the thing that I'm most passionate about is it shows that we can all be this real deep source of support for each other. Like, I love meditation, and I've learned a lot from my meditation teachers, but we don't need to go to an expert for so many things, right? I mean, if you have another human being, any other human being, and what they can offer you is just their presence, just listening, it is so impactful. And I just love this reality that we can all do that. For all of us can do this, right? It's very democratic in the lowercase d democratic sense of, we, the people, can support each other through things in a really powerful way. And it helps to have structure, though, because that structure helps make sure we don't fall into bad habits of hitting the other person over the head with our advice and our suggestions and talking over them when they're sharing. But yeah, we can all be this community of support for each other. And that's what I love about this.
And I think I go into this topic with every guest of mindfulness in action, and that is touching on the current state of the world. I have a feeling there is such a separation, right? Like there's maybe like this group of people that I'm connecting with like yourself, and people with amazing vision and wanting to do so many things where humanity is and connection is so important. And then there is this other side where it feels like we humans are not serving that part, and that is to just drive things so fast, so quickly, without awareness of emotions, without even neglecting almost a sense that it doesn't matter if you're a human. It's just like something like cheap. I don't know, like I can't even fathom on how hard it is for me to observe that part where there is everything but humanity. How do we hold these two reality? How to hold these two realities? Is it enough to find communities, just the ones that you are creating and the daily connect, for example? Is that the way forward, to find the refuge? How to go about it?
Yeah. Well, I'm really sitting with your question because I know what you're talking about can be really painful. This feeling when we look out at the world and see the news or people who are experiencing it directly, of just how much inhumanity we see in different forms. And I think what each of us does, I believe in each person having their own path and each person finding their own way, that it won't be the same for each person. I can say for myself, one thing I think about is, and again, for me, this is where I draw on my meditation practice and reflecting on a level of purpose or spirituality about what I'm doing with my life, is what do I want to bring into the world? Because it's so easy to get locked into like looking at things that seem really horrible and just freezing, right? And just kind of gawking at how bad things are. And it makes sense. And it makes sense that happens. It's a natural reaction. And but I always try and ask myself, what's my role here? And I think of it like I'm trying to get solid in what I'm here to do and what I'm here to offer. And in a way, if I get too drawn into the drama and all this other stuff that's happening, I might start to lose that, right? There's a quote by the thinker Buckminster Fuller that I imagine some listeners might be familiar with, where he talked about, you can't fight the old reality. What you can do is you can, and I'm paraphrasing here, but you can build towards a new reality. You can hold the vision for a new reality and build towards that. And that's much more constructive than trying to fight an old reality, which is falling apart and dysfunctional. And yeah, the sort of embodied contemplative practices, the slow moving martial arts, was how I got started in mindfulness and meditation. And there was a little example that I learned from that has always stood with me, where if you, let's suppose someone is sitting if I'm sitting in a chair, and then my martial arts instructor were to say, okay, I'm going to try and stop you, Peter, from standing up from the chair you're sitting in. And they're going to, push or move their hands. And if what I focus on is what my instructor is doing to try and stop me, and I have deflect their hands and they're pushing everything, I'm going to stay stuck. But if what I do is I look ahead 10 yards, 10 meters, and I focus on moving my energy in that direction, suddenly I'll be able to stand up and I'll find a way to move past them. So having that vision forward, for me, that's what I think about. I want to hold the vision of what's coming forward. I don't want to get too distracted by all the things that are coming my way. That's something that helps ground me and give me direction.
Thank you so much for bringing that into the perspective. I'm sure it's going to be helpful for many people. It certainly is for me, remembering my martial arts practice and everything. And I've also believed that at a certain point, maybe when the whole field of mindfulness started to just spread, it was a lot about going into the societies or places where individualism is highly valued.
Yeah.
And I somehow sense that there might be even some friction within that, because mindfulness is everything, but not the skill that is aimed at strengthening an individual. And it seems even that we were promoting it as like, you can get focused, you can get calm, and it was all for the individual. And now, as you're sharing, so the new word is compassion, self-compassion, that it's also about the community.
Yeah.
The connection, the togetherness, right? Like, and the importance about it. So as if we are learning kind of like collectively as well. I have somehow a sense of that progressive understanding of what needs to happen so that we all kind of like build a new world. And I'm where we also, there was another concept that I know, yeah, I'm offering very little time for you, but then here it is. I said we have to be careful about the time, but I'm going to drop the question. You mentioned non-duality, and as we were preparing for this talk as well, where does that in the world of individualism, success, like this kind of like success in terms of material world that is so present and getting strong, where does non-duality fit there?
Yeah. Well, I find for myself a useful way to look at things is there's an interesting paradox about life where the more I get in touch with who I am, the more who I am opens up, right? And this is the wisdom that many contemplative traditions have offered to us. And in certain traditions, we're getting towards the idea of what's called non-duality. The more I get in touch with who I am, my sense, my thought that I'm this separate self starts to feel shaky and questionable. And I start to open up and realize I'm so deeply interconnected that I am the world around me. And yet the other side of it, which is funny too, though, is that in order to fully be a part of the world, I have to be my unique self. I have my own unique gifts to offer. I believe each person has their own unique gifts to offer. And so those may seem contradictory, but it's what is sometimes called a paradox, where it's two things which seem to be in contradiction, but actually if you hold both of them, it starts bringing you closer to a truth. And so that's just a thing I think about sometimes, and a way I try to move through life, of remembering that I'm deeply interconnected with everything, that this life I have is temporary. That feels quite poignant for me now, as I'm turning 40 soon, and I'm thinking, my gosh, where's the time gone? And human life is precious, and it's limited, and I really want to cherish the sense of this beautiful world that I live in. And as I realize that, again, what comes up in the same token is what's my role to play, and what's your role to play? And I meet people sometimes, and I'll silently in my mind be thinking that. I'd be like, I wonder what gifts you're here to offer us. And because I really do believe we all have something. And so in that sense, you asked a bit about maybe what this means in kind of everyday life. And a thing that it's a question I hold to in all the different spaces I'm in, which, ranges from healthcare to government, to education, to businesses, is I believe on some level there is a best form of everything, right? Like business has a really important role somehow to play in our world. Education has an important role to play somehow. Money has an important role to play somehow. And I find myself asking and just holding that question of what is it, right? Like it's like when you look at a child, and maybe sometimes, I have kids, and sometimes they're easy to get along with, and sometimes they can be troublesome, but you love them, and you try and hold in mind, okay, you're this being who's trying to grow, and the curiosity about like what's this beautiful form that you're trying to grow into. I think about that with everything, with money, with the internet, with whatever I see, and I sometimes find myself becoming judgmental about whatever, but I like it much more when I'm operating from the curiosity of what something might bloom into.
I'm just really getting the sense of the importance of having the space, the trust, and having the someone hold the space. Like I somehow felt disconnected coming to Serbia, and I'm living in the region where it's mindfulness is not flourishing. It's just really early stages, and it's so amazing waking up, having conversations, and then realizing it's kind of like, wow, it's so scarce. And if it becomes the whole world, right, then it's like, well, there's nothing going on. There is no way forward. And this is what I cherish, that we can have conversations like this, because it really certainly helps me to have hope and realizing like, well, there is so much being done out there. And then it doesn't matter where we are, but still being connected and sharing that it is possible. And I know that a lot of teachers, mindfulness teachers, are having really difficult time at the moment. There's some challenges also, like all that big groups that wanted to come and attend all the programs are it's not really happening the same way how during COVID and pre-COVID. But if there was one, I think you gave already a lot of guidelines of what one could do. But for those struggling mindfulness teachers at the moment, would there be any advice that you could offer? I know that it's not about advice giving or fixing or anything, but guideline, like guidance.
Yeah.
Just imagine someone being alone and not having their community and giving up on teaching, for example.
Yeah. Well, thanks for naming that. And I would say first is I feel for you, those of you who are out there feeling that way. I've been through something too. Especially the last year or two were very disruptive due to all sorts of things happening in the world. And I was struggling a lot then too, asking, what am I doing? And can I continue what I've been doing? Is there value in it? What happened to this beautiful blossoming of interest I saw in it? What's happening now? So I feel for all of you, and I've been there also. I go back to community, and so I love, Dalida, that you've got this space to bring us together, and finding your people. I go back to knowing that somehow or other my purpose will continue on and live on. It might take a different form, but something that no one can take away from me is my positive intentions. And so I know that if I hold on to those, they will somehow turn into something positive, even if it's not originally what I was doing, and even if there might be a lot of painful disruption along the way. But yeah, I don't take it lightly. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other.
Thank you so much, Peter. And I do hope that whoever is listening this is going to show up on 23rd of April, one more time, for Daily Connect introduction session. Just look for Peter Bonanno and dailyconnect.co. And I do hope to see everyone. There are different times for different time zones, or just reach out to me. And check. I'm happy to share how to connect with Peter and the team. So this is all for now. My name is Dalida Turkovic. This is Mindfulness in Action, and we see you next time. Thank you.